Out with the president calling out the military-industrial complex in a far-ranging press conference that he held over the weekend. We'll talk about that. And then there's some conflict brewing within the Biden campaign between essentially black Americans, black Democrats, the Black Democratic Caucus, and the Bernie bros, so to speak, the progressive left wing that is dominating the Biden campaign right now, and we'll tell you what that's all about. And then hopefully we'll have time to talk a little bit about old Kaepernick. Yes, Colin Kaepernick can't find a football team. No one seems to want the guy, but don't feel sorry for him because Nike is picking up the slack for him. But you know, this weekend, the Labor Day weekend, is traditionally the kickoff of college football, among others, and then the NFL starts normally the following week. Of course, it's about 2 or 3 weeks out, but is it the death of football? So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. But we start out with a Politico story. Trump are accommodating weapons makers. This from Politico. Now, what this is all about is essentially the military-industrial complex and Donald Trump calling them out. We've talked about this in various forms and fashions over the few years that I've been doing the show. And I've played this video I'm about to play for you before. This is just a snippet of a fairly lengthy video that I would encourage you to watch. I think the entire video is 20 to 30 minutes long. It is Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address to the nation, where he talks about the military-industrial complex and the necessity of it to a point, but also a warning to us as Americans that we better stay on top of this thing. Now, I'm only going to play a 3 or 4 minute portion of it that addresses this specific issue. But when it comes to the military, there is probably no one, certainly at the time and maybe even now, his words certainly ring true. You'll see that in just a moment. But Dwight Eisenhower was uniquely positioned to talk about the military-industrial complex. Because prior to World War II, a lot of people really don't realize this, we essentially had no standing army. We had no manufacturers of weapons, those types of things. It was all geared up to kick into World War II. And the entire country, when it came to the military especially, and industrial ties to the military, dramatically changed during World War II and certainly afterwards. And keep in mind that Dwight Eisenhower, at the time he gave this address, was not only leaving as president of the United States, but he was the supreme commander of the entire Allied forces. In other words, not only the United States of American forces, but all of our allies in World War II. He was the supreme commander. So if anybody knew about the growth of the military and the threat that it might pose to a free society, it was Dwight Eisenhower. So we're going to play this video, and I want you to listen to, basically, he gives you a brief history of where we were with the military before World War II, what happened during World War II, and then pretty much a warning about what to expect going forward. As you're listening to this, I want you to think about President Trump and him taking this very thing that Dwight Eisenhower calls the military-industrial complex, that Donald Trump is taking this on. Listen to all of this, and we'll come back and discuss it. Check it out.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
I love where he says that only an alert population that is engaged essentially is going to be able to withstand this military-industrial complex. Is that not really what I talk about on a daily basis, that we have to battle ignorance and apathy, that we have to be engaged as citizens? See, this is something that you don't hear a whole lot, but we have become disengaged in general. Keep in mind that even as much as passions are high politically right now, and there are a lot of people that are very active politically, certainly Trump supporters are very passionate, half the country doesn't even bother to register to vote, doesn't even care, really, even in spite of all that's happening right now. And you kind of wonder, if they're not going to get truly woke now, when are they ever? If not now, when? And so we are shirking our responsibilities. I'm not talking about everybody. I realize if you're listening to this show that I'm probably preaching to the choir to a certain extent. But as Americans as a whole, we have absolved ourselves from all things political. People say, oh, you don't want to talk about two things. You don't want to talk about church and religion and politics. Well, certainly they're meshed anyway. But if you're not willing to talk about your faith, and you don't want to talk about the greatest country, the experiment we call the United States of America, what do you want to talk about? The latest sale at Walmart? I mean, I don't know. So it is probably the biggest threat to our nation right now is our own ignorance and apathy. That's why I do the show, because I truly love this country, and I absolutely believe that ignorance and apathy are the gravest threats that face this country. In spite of the pandemic, even bigger than Joe Biden and the Democrats is our own ignorance and apathy. Because I honestly believe if we get educated and we're not apathetic, then there's no way Joe Biden and the Democrats can win. The only reason that progressives can take this country over is if we allow it to happen. And I know that a lot of you out there are fighting and going hard. And that's one thing I ask you all the time about the idea that not all of us can be fighters, but all of us can support those in the fight. That's why I ask you pretty regular. It probably gets aggravating sometimes, but you need to tune in to like the sponsors of this show. We're live from Big Daddy Unlimited Studios, otherwise known as BDU, and I'm very grateful for the use of this studio. I really need you to check out our sponsor link. Go to the description of our show. It's above wherever you're watching the video. Go above it, and you'll see a description of the show, whether it be YouTube, spell it out, John Martin Talks. We need support there, or anywhere you're watching it. And look at our sponsorship link. Click on that for 99 cents, virtually a free trial. you can get access to anything you could possibly imagine for Second Amendment issues, from guns and ammo to tactical stuff to swag and everything else. Then if you choose to cancel at any time, you can pay $10 a month for factory direct pricing on all of those items. And yes, I get a portion of that. But if you're not willing to support the fighters, which me and Billy Bob, my psychic sidekick, who has a Twitter handle, is, then what are we left with? Because, CNBC gets their people, CNN gets their people. If you want an alternative to that, then you've got to help. So I just say that. But back to the story itself. This military-industrial complex is real. What Dwight Eisenhower warned us about all those decades ago has come to pass. And that is exactly what Donald Trump is up against. And the military-industrial complex, just like President Eisenhower warned us, has literally weaved its way into every aspect of our lives. They make movies about it and stuff like that. And it's not a conspiracy theory. A lot of that is based on truth. One reason why I like Clancy movies are so entertaining and books are so entertaining is because there is an element of truth in them. And if you want to see a show, I've been watching it, streaming it. There's a show on called The Blacklist. And in it, it basically takes on a worldwide military-industrial complex. And it's a pretty interesting show because I think there are elements of it that are absolutely factual. But the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump is up against all of this. He has exposed this multiple times, and he did it over the weekend. And I tell you right now, the president is in grave peril doing this. Because not only is it probably one of the reasons why Kennedy was assassinated, and I'm not calling for any of that, I'm just saying that the president has a lot of courage. But politically, he's being bashed by everything and called everything but a child of God. And a lot of this, at the heart of it, is the military-industrial complex. Keep in mind that even Bernie Sanders and his crowd, who was supposed to be, whatever happened, let me just ask you this. Whatever happened to the anti-war part of the Democratic Party? It is gone. Remember when they were like chaining themselves to the fence out in Texas of Bush Jr.'s house out there? Where did all of those people go? It's not like we're not still in war. I mean, remember what happened in Syria. I was going to talk about this just a minute from now, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. Remember what happened when Donald Trump talked about moving and did move 50 troops inside of Syria. Oh my God, it unified the Republicans and the Democrats as much as they're apart from each other. There was bipartisan agreement, which means, of course, Republicans caved. That's what bipartisanship means. But they reared their ugly heads. Basically, the only one that didn't was like Rand Paul. And he's being attacked, really. But they unified against President Trump, and it's all because the military-industrial complex. Bernie Sanders was even pro-war, for God's sakes. It's unbelievable. All right, let's move along here. President Trump on Monday accused the United States military leadership of being beholden to arms manufacturers in an attack on his own administration only days after reports that he had mocked fallen soldiers. Well, I want to address this issue of mocked fallen soldiers for a minute. First of all, it's totally anonymous. This is from The Atlantic. If you haven't seen this, then you probably were partying on the beach and maybe spreading the virus. I don't know. But The Atlantic put out a story over the weekend. Really, I guess it started maybe on Friday. And they said they had anonymous sources that President Trump, when he was over in Europe celebrating, I think, the World War II, the end of World War II and all of that, and then D-Day and everything else, that he refused to go to some World War I veterans' graves. It was raining. The official excuse was that it was raining, bad weather, and everything else, which it was. But it was because he supposedly said, well, why should I go there? Because they're, dead soldiers. They were just a bunch of losers. And it's all anonymous. But there are many on the record now have come out that were there when it happened, or supposedly happened, and said that it did not happen. There's another thing that continues to pop up. And they talk about it during this story, and they talk about it during the story I was just describing to you about President Trump, besmirching supposedly dead military veterans. And that is this idea that Donald Trump attacked John McCain and basically said that he was a loser and that I preferred those that weren't captured to those that were captured and all that. Now, you could argue that Donald Trump should not have said that John McCain is a bona fide hero, all that kind of stuff. You could say that, and you could make a case for that, and I would listen to you, and I might agree with some aspects of it. It wasn't President Trump's finest moment, and I'm no fan of John McCain at all. Matter of fact, I tell you all the time that he will go down in history, and McCain, as the greatest senator in the history of the Democratic Party. And you look at his closest friends, they seem to all be Democrat. God rest the soul of John McCain. But the thing about Donald Trump that you have to understand is that he didn't attack all. So they make it sound like that since he attacked McCain, that he could somehow say, okay, well, that shows you that he's willing to attack all these soldiers. That's absolutely categorically false. If you know anything about Donald Trump, he is very specific when it comes to attacking someone. If you attack him, he is a New York street fighter, counterpuncher. He's going to hit you twice and twice as hard and hit you with what he thinks is going to hurt you the most. I can tell you, I lived and worked up in New York for almost 5 years, right in the heart of the city. And New Yorkers are you do not want to get in a verbal confrontation with New Yorkers because they will slap you upside the head, both physically and really mentally, in the harshest possible way. And they will say something to you designed to cut you, as they used to say, to the quick and hurt you the most. I'm just telling you, that's the way it is. At least that's the way it was then. And I see this in Donald Trump. And so he absolutely was not attacking all soldiers when he hit McCain. Keep in mind, John McCain started it by attacking Donald Trump. He threw the first punch, and it's no surprise that Donald Trump hit him twice as hard and twice as often. And it reminds me of the whole Rosie O'Donnell thing. You remember back during the debates, Donald Trump it was stated by one of the moderators, I think Megyn Kelly of Fox News at that time. She said, "You called women fat pigs." And Donald Trump corrected her. He said, "No, I didn't call all women fat pigs. I called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig." And that is love him, hate him, or whatever. But Rosie O'Donnell started it again. And he hit her where he thought it would hurt the most. That is Donald Trump. That is the man we elected. I knew that about him. I actually like that about him because he is a fighter, much like I am, much like me and Billy Bob, my psychic sidekick. I think I told you, has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But let's get on with this article here. It says, and I like how they describe this right here. No bias here. Speaking at a combative White House news conference, Trump said leaders in love with me because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies, the military-industrial complex, that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. Combative. So Trump was combative. I love how they always describe Trump. Everything but a child of God. Do you remember ever hearing that Obama was combative? And look at Biden right now. Oh, he's caring and loving, never combative, even though he sometimes is up there. And he's not combative because he's like, how did I get who am I? But endless wars is a concept that Donald Trump has coined. It's been around before him, but he's made it a big focal point of his presidency. And he's absolutely right. And has he gone personally far enough to bring the boys home? I don't think so, myself. I don't think so. But he's gone farther than any other president. Keep in mind, he's talking about getting out of Afghanistan, that we've been there longer than any war in the history of the United States. And yet he's coming up against Republicans and Democrats who are opposed to withdrawing the troops. Do you wonder why? Why are they for endless wars? Why is there no opposition Party now, the Democratic Party, as I reminded you earlier, used to be the party of anti-war, had a strong element in it. That element is gone. It's gone to the fact that even the natural fighters of it should be hardcore progressives like Bernie Sanders, right? He should be, he's talked about this, but now he's pro-war himself. Because endless wars, they're getting paid. They're getting paid. And this is a very courageous thing that Donald Trump is doing. And he's not getting credit for it. I'm giving him some. Some people, this is something that Trump said. He said, some people don't like to come home. Some people like to continue to spend money. One cold-hearted globalist betrayal after another. That's what it was. Talking about the endless wars. And keep in mind, all of this is timed together. If you think this is coincidence that they came out and said, oh, there's polling now that shows that the military who supported Donald Trump in 2016, I'm talking about everyday rank and file soldiers, supported Donald Trump overwhelmingly, and veterans as well, in 2016. There are supposedly polls now that show that he is losing support among them. So is it a coincidence that these stories pop out like this one about him supposedly saying, calling into question the courage of our dead soldiers? I don't think it's a coincidence at all. It is orchestrated. It is planned. And if you can't see it, then you better open your eyes. Even if you hate Donald Trump, you should be concerned about the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about, and how Donald Trump, just look at how the one thing, and I'm repeating myself, but if I say it bears repeating, you really need to look at this. Ask yourself honestly, those of you who support Donald Trump, I think you're on board with this. But those of you who are undecided, even if you don't like Donald Trump, take an honest assessment and look at the only thing that Democrats and Republicans can seem to get together on. It is what I would call perpetual war. And that, to me, all of this is orchestrated. He asserted, talking about Donald Trump, he asserted that while U.S. troops largely support him, he does not receive the same affinity from the top, talking about the generals. He made the comment as he advocated for the removal of American troops from endless wars and lambasted NATO allies who rip us off. Well, this is all true. This is absolutely all true. And you don't hear too much about how Donald Trump now has destroyed NATO. Do you hear that anymore? For a while there, that was one of the things they talked about consistently. Oh, he's destroying NATO. Actually, NATO now, with Donald Trump's leadership, is stronger than it's ever been, because he's actually forcing the NATO allies to live up to, guess what? The agreement they signed. Promises made, promises kept. He's forcing others to keep their promises, and they don't like it. The White House later elaborated on Trump's comments, saying that a number of politicians and Pentagon officials had been unwilling to pull out of the United States' endless wars, and that Trump stood with soldiers and generals who want to end those conflicts. And I told you about Syria. And when he pulled out those 50 soldiers, you would have thought it was the end of the world. You remember that? Oh, he's a betrayal of the Kurds. Actually, the situation's better now since he did that, right? You don't hear much about that. It's not like it was destroyed. But listen, I want you to listen to this next paragraph and media bias. Listen to how they describe the event, the press conference. And tell me, do you hear a little bias in that? It says the event took place outdoors in an unusual setting of the White House North Portico on a relatively mild summer holiday. Oh, they're painting a pretty picture. But Trump's tone was hardly calm and breezy. So they determined that, with a particular impatience in his voice. What does an impatience in his voice actually sound like? As he sparred with reporters and hit his adversaries, he called the Democratic challenger Joe Biden stupid and went on lengthy tirades against China, NATO countries, and so-called Steele dossier, which is the PP dossier. So keep in mind, the media is part of this cabal. They're part of the military-industrial complex. They're defending it. They get paid. They get all kind of stuff. If you look at it, Dwight Eisenhower warned us in that video. Check it out at the beginning of the show. And he talked about how this insidious, this military-industrial complex would literally put its fingers into every aspect of our lives, right down to local political thing. Think about that. The closing of bases. Remember that? And this has nothing to do with Trump. This happened under Obama and Bush, that literally had to form a commission to close bases that were no longer needed. And basically, it didn't really get done, did it? And it got down to local politics, where you literally had mayors and city commissions of small towns chiming in on this, because everybody's got a piece of the pie. That's what it's about. And I'm not besmirching our military in any way. And I'm agreeing, if you listen to Eisenhower, he actually said that it was necessary in this world that we live in, that we were facing in the future. And he understood the communist threat and all that, like I say, probably better than anybody. And he didn't say we shouldn't have a military industrial complex. In fact, he basically said that it was necessary, but it was mainly a necessary evil. And it was up to what? It was up to the citizens of the United States of America to be informed and active, is basically what he said. And I think that is as much a problem as anything, because we have pushed politics out of our lives. We don't even want to talk about politics. You know, those kind of things. It's just, and if you don't want to talk about it, then you better check yourself, because really it is the price of being in a free society. A democracy, as people call it, a republic certainly, which is what we're supposed to have, absolutely depends on citizens that are knowledgeable and active in government. It depends. Without it, it's over. That's why Benjamin Franklin famously said he gave us a republic if we could keep it. And he's talking about the American people. Several of Trump's points seem to reflect major news stories that published over the weekend, including a New York Times deep dive into Biden's history on China. I'll have to look into that. I've not read the story. The story contrasts Biden's cautious optimism at the turn of the millennium toward, and then the budding world player, with more critical recent stance of the former vice president, talking about Biden, toward China's economic and human rights abuses. So they're saying that basically that Biden was kind of neutral on China, then kind of was pro-China maybe, and then now he's taking a tougher stance on China. Really? Is that true? I mean, it talks about here, China, what did he say here? With more critical recent stance of the former vice president toward China. How about this recent stance? We're going to play you a video that was from the 2020 campaign before Biden got the nomination, when he was trying to secure the nomination. So it wasn't like ancient history. And he talks about China and Donald Trump, and he literally mocks the idea that China poses any real threat to us. Keep in mind, what is the shelf life of this thing, considering the coronavirus, the Wuhan flu, the China plague, whatever you want to call it? Listen to then candidate, before he got the nomination, of Joe Biden, when he talks about China in such a flippant way. Check it out.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the east, in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
They're not bad folks. Yeah, that's because at the same time he's doing this, when he was vice president, he actually took his son on Air Force Two during an official visit to China. And oh, by the way, Hunter Biden cut a deal with a Chinese financial institution for $1.5 billion, with a B, $1 billion. And Joe said he and Hunter never ever discussed this deal whatsoever. No wonder that China loves Joe Biden. He's in their pocket, man. And he's not the only one. It's Republicans that's true. One of the biggest shipping companies in China, Mitch McConnell's wife is like the daughter of one of the biggest Chinese industries there, a shipping industry. So this thing goes across the board. Yeah, I'm not limiting it to Democrats by any stretch. But Trump cast a report talking about this New York Times report as exposing Biden as a China supporter. Well, is there any doubt about that? A character in a globalist system zapping jobs away from American workers. Biden is a China supporter, not characterizing him as, not casting him as. He is a China supporter. I just talked about the Hunter Biden deal. There's really no question about it. Trump went on to say, with Biden, he shipped away our jobs, threw open our borders, and sent our youth to fight in those crazy, endless wars. All absolutely true. And what was the big thing between Bernie? You remember between Bernie and Hillary back in 2016? One of the big contentions was Hillary voted for the Iraq war. And Bernie was like, oh my God, he big touting as how he did not vote for it. And he condemned Hillary Clinton for voting for it. And it's true. But two things I'd point out to you. One is Bernie ended up in lockstep with Hillary. And it hasn't even come up that Biden was one of the chief voters for the Iraq war. That Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, was one of the ones that pushed for the Iraq war. But crickets now about that. Bernie is like lockstep with Joe on that. I don't think it's even been mentioned. It's unbelievable. The president also claimed that China was using American investments to bolster its own war machine and decried its treatment by the World Trade Organization, otherwise known as the WTO, asserting that it gets preferential treatment as a developing country. And I like how they say that the president claimed that China was using its American investment. It's not claimed. Yeah, he claimed that. But here's the thing. The media knows that is a fact. It doesn't take much research to see that what they're saying here, that what President Trump is saying is absolutely true. There's just no doubt about it that China is using the U.S. stock market to fund its military growth and its growth around the world. There's just no doubt about that. And Donald Trump is the only one taking this on, at least the only major elected official. And this idea about a developing nation, that China gets developed nation status, well, I mean, China has some of the most modern cities in the world. They have the second largest, basically, military in the world, if not growing on. They're supposedly overtaking us economically, yet they're a developing country. That gives them special treatment preference. It means they don't have to follow certain environmental regulations and all kind of stuff. Global warming is not an issue in China because they're a developing country. But Trump went on to say, we are treated as a nation that is fully developed, talking about the United States, and we're not fully developed as far as I'm concerned. And I would agree with Donald Trump on that. Actually, if you look at what's happening right now, the sad thing is, yeah, we're one of the most developed countries in the world, but there are parts of our nation right now that are not developing, they're actually devolving. Look what's happening in Portland. Look what's happening in all of our major cities. What about the entire state of California? The entire state of California used to be, if it was separate from the United States, would have been one of the greatest countries in the world, let alone the greatest state. Now it's gone from the jewel to the stool. Because there was a time when everybody was California dreaming, right? Not so much now. People are fleeing there in droves. The jewel to the stool. In other words, they went from being the eye of everything to you got to have a poop map to navigate your way through San Francisco. California is becoming literally a third world nation. So parts of our country are not only developing, they are devolving. And this will only continue under a Joe Biden presidency. God help us if that's true. He ended the news conference talking about Trump by again criticizing China for failing to contain the coronavirus, then wished reporters a happy Labor Day. So he criticized China, the China virus, for the virus that's coming from China that is causing so much problem here. I guess that makes him racist, right? We're going to talk about Trump, the racist, here in just a minute. But let me just go ahead and say this right now. Donald Trump, and if you're new to the show, hang on with me here. Donald Trump, without doubt, is the worst racist that has ever occupied the White House. Yeah, I said it. He's the worst racist ever. You know why I say that? Because he sucks at it, man. Apparently he didn't read the Clucker Handbook or the White Supremacist Handbook, because he's done more to help people of color and African Americans than any president really in my lifetime. Think about it. Before the pandemic hit the United States of America, we had the lowest unemployment rate among African Americans in the history of the nation. We had home ownership at an all-time high for Black Americans, which is extremely important, home ownership. Black-owned businesses were up 400% during the Trump administration. So as a racist, he's the worst ever because he absolutely sucks at it, man. But we got less than 2 months to go now before the November election. And I'm telling you right now, I'm going to make a stronger point here in a minute. But when it comes to Black Americans, you're being played, man. You are absolutely being played by the hardcore left, the mainstream media. And all of us, to a certain extent, are being played because we're basically being told that Donald Trump is everything but a child of God. He's the only guy facing down the military-industrial complex that this story is about, and he's being chastised for it. When anybody who just takes a cursory look knows that China is our number one enemy. China is the enemy to freedom throughout the world. I guarantee you other countries know this. We need to understand this. And we got less than 2 months to make that decision. Matter of fact, early voting is going to start in a couple of weeks in some places. And, the thought that Joe Biden could actually win is terrifying to me. I'm just telling you like it is. All right, we're going to move on to our next story. Let's see how much time we got. Purity test. Democrats clash. This is another Politico story. Clash over Biden diversity goals. So this is about the Justice Democrats and some other groups that basically are the ones responsible for Ocasio-Cortez and the Twitter twats, as I call them, otherwise known as the squad. I think Twitter twats is a better description of them, more descriptive. But these people that I've been telling you are basically behind Biden right now. They are the Trojan horse people. Apparently there is a conflict between these folks and traditional Black American political leaders like the Black Caucus, and we'll get into it. Black Democrats are urging Joe Biden to resist growing pressure from the left to impose an anti-Wall Street purity test on his hiring decisions if elected, warning that it threatens the party's desire to boost diversity in powerful executive branch posts. So that's all that matters, diversity. The diversity skin color needs to look like a McDonald's commercial or something. It has nothing to do with merit. I'm not saying people of color don't have merit. I think it comes in every color. Merit does. I wish we actually picked people based on that. But it's not about diversity of thought or merit. It's about what do you fill a certain slot. But progressives have been calling on Biden to take a hard line in filling out his cabinet with groups such as Justice Democrats. They were the ones that drove home the election, and I guess soon to be re-election, of Ocasio-Cortez, and the Sunrise Movement, another progressive group, demanding that he, talking about Joe Biden, pledge to appoint 0 current or former Wall Street executives or corporate lobbyists to his administration. Think about that. Now, that sounds kind of good in one sense, but if you don't have people who are involved in Wall Street and the financial industry in your cabinet, then you're actually putting people in there that don't have experience in dealing with the reality of our world. And there has been a conflict, if you will, between some of this. The Democrats, if you look back at Hillary Clinton, for instance, she was, and Obama for that matter, they were largely funded by Wall Street. So there's some legitimate concerns, and Biden is as well, about that aspect of it. But the idea that you don't have anyone represented on Wall Street in your cabinet is just not practical and doesn't, in fact, make much sense at all. But there is a big divide by this. Now, Black Americans, the Democratic caucus is in conflict, shall we say, with the Ocasio-Cortez wing of the party, because they're saying that Black Americans, in order for them to get appointed to the cabinet level, are going to naturally come through Wall Street, and they want to see some African Americans who have achieved some level of prowess on Wall Street actually appointed, like white people have been in the past, and I can understand that. Said here, but black Democrats on Capitol Hill and on K Street, which is the lobbyist street, basically, say that that's in direct conflict with the party's overreaching diversity goals and would keep many people of color, including those with ties to the financial world, from ascending to key positions long dominated by white males. I'm telling you, Black America, you are being played. You're absolutely being played, and you have been for a long time by the Democratic Party. But the Joe Biden deal and the people behind him and Joe Biden, the man himself, is the ultimate play, if you will, and betrayal, because Joe Biden, I'm not going to play it now, but we'll play it again soon, I'm sure. Joe Biden has never been for Black Americans. Except for putting them in prison. He tells you in one of his most famous speeches that he doesn't care in the 1994 crime bill, which he sponsored, when it comes to the reasons why black youth are violent in the street and committing felonies. He said he doesn't care what caused it. And he lists a few things that potentially caused it and says he doesn't care. He just wants to get those predators, talking about your children, off the street. And Kamala Harris and him have an agreement in that. There's a competition between the two of them for who put and kept more Black Americans in prison. Was it Kamala Harris or Joe Biden? Percentage-wise, it's probably Kamala Harris. Total numbers-wise, I think that Biden holds the lead in that. But you're being played, Black America. I'm just telling you. Wait, you get truly woke. You can hate Donald Trump all you want, but know exactly who you're voting for if you vote for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Said Representative Gregory Meeks, Democrat from New York, a senior lawmaker on the House Financial Services Committee and a member of the Black Caucus. He said, I love what he says here. We've got to fix all the problems that were created over the last 4 years, talking about the Trump administration. We're going to need every hand on deck. I keep hearing this. But let me ask you, Black Americans, chime in on Facebook, wherever you are. I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. Hasn't Black America's financial situation improved prior to this pandemic? I mean, the numbers are what they are under Donald Trump. And keep in mind, Bob Johnson, the founder of BET and the first Black American billionaire, said that Donald Trump, basically a year ago he said this, Donald Trump was bringing the light of the economic prosperity into parts of the country that had never seen it before. He's talking about Black Americans. And Biden has come out and said that he's going to kill the very things that Tim Scott, who is a black senator from South Carolina, put in that tax bill to help struggling black communities. They're going to kill it. Just listen to what they say. Take them at their word. But black business leaders that Democrats have floated for potential Biden cabinet positions include, and I don't know these people, Roger Ferguson, the CEO of financial services giant TIAA, and one-time vice chair of the Federal Reserve, as well as John Rogers and Melody Hobson, the co-CEOs of Aero Investments. So they're saying that there are people who are qualified to do this. But the leftists, the hardcore leftists that have taken over the Democratic Party, like Bernie and Ocasio-Cortez, don't want anyone who has ties to Wall Street in Biden's cabinet, which was going to preclude some leading Black Americans. As I say, you are being played. Then they go on to say President Donald Trump's cabinet-level appointments have been mostly white, with HUD Secretary Ben Carson, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, and SBA Administrator Javata Anaza among the few exceptions. So they list 3 cabinet positions of people of color in the Trump administration. Now, they don't talk about the women and all of that. But here's the bottom line on that. And I'm just doing the math on it, ladies and gentlemen. So I report it, you decide. There are 15 cabinet positions, 15 members of the cabinet. So they're mentioning 3. That's roughly 20% of Donald Trump's cabinet is people of color, right? This is what the article is saying. Now, the fact is that 72% of Americans are white, Caucasian. So it sounds like that Donald Trump's cabinet essentially reflects the the racial makeup of the country. Now, I'm not saying that that should be the beginning and end all, but to make the charge that Donald Trump is not representing equity in all races, creeds, and colors in his cabinet is unfair just on math alone. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't have more people of color. I'm all about the merit of it. But let me just tell you, the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will have one major impact on Black America and its history. It will be the signal of the death, in my opinion, of the Martin Luther King legacy. It's already Martin Luther King's legacy, man, is being tarnished on a daily basis by what's happening in the Black community. Remember, Martin Luther King's dream was that people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Everything that the Democratic Party talks about is all about skin color and that kind of thing. It's not about diversity of thought. It's not about empowering people, really. It is simply painting some kind of like mosaic, man. But Martin Luther King's character, we got that meme because he talks about that. But this is the end of Martin Luther King's legacy if you elect these people. All right, we only got about a minute left. I just wanted to talk very quickly about Colin Kaepernick. This is from a Breitbart article. Apparently, the NFL season is about to kick off, and Colin Kaepernick is without a job. Let me just tell you, first of all, he's not a very good quarterback. But there is what I call the Tim Tebow factor. Now, you need to give me 30 seconds to explain this. The reason why teams don't want Colin Kaepernick is the same reason why they don't want Tim Tebow. Because neither one of them really has the talent to be a top-tier quarterback, right? And they say, there's got to be, of all the teams, people playing in the league, second teamers and stuff, that that Tebow, for instance, could play for. But go back to and look at when Belichick, the last team that Tebow was signed with, he was asked consistently every time they had a preseason meeting about Tim Tebow, who was the third-string quarterback. Now, I'm not comparing the two morally and character, but no coach wants to talk about the third-string quarterback. They don't want to hear questions about that. They don't. So that's one of the reasons I think why Tim Tebow, it's not fair, but it's one of the reasons why he's not in the league right now is because of the character he has, positive. People want to talk about the third-string quarterback. Same thing with Kaepernick, although flip sides of the same coin on a negative side. No coach wants to talk about Kaepernick as a third or second-string quarterback when he doesn't have the talent to be first-string. So anyway, I don't feel sorry for him because he's got a $5 million deal a year with Nike. But the NFL, man, has gone into the tubes. I'm very sad to report that I don't think I'm going to be watching any football, college or pro, in the upcoming. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. Remember, we're on America's Voice News as well, rebroadcast along their streaming network. Check out our sponsorship link, Big Daddy Unlimited, in the show description above the video, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at the savings you get. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.